Thanksgiving at my parents' house followed the same script it had for the past decade. Mom's dining room table was set with the good china, the turkey was perfectly golden, and my older brother Derek was holding court about his recent promotion to senior vice president at his tech company. The salary bump alone was $40,000, Derek was saying, his voice carrying across the living room where we'd gathered for a pre-dinner drinks. Plus stock options, enhanced benefits package, corner office on the executive floor. Mom's face glowed with pride. We're so proud of you, honey. Senior VP at 38, that's remarkable. It's the culmination of 15 years of strategic career moves, Derek continued, swirling his bourbon. You have to play the long game in corporate America. I sat on the couch near the window, half listening, checking email on my phone. And what about you, Lauren? Aunt Carol asked politely. How's the bookkeeping business? Before I could answer, Dad interjected. Oh, Lauren does freelance accounting work from home. Small business clients, nothing too complicated. His tone suggested I helped people balance their checkbooks. It keeps me busy, I said neutrally. Derek laughed. Lauren's always been content with small-scale stuff. Not everyone needs to climb the corporate ladder. Someone has to serve the small businesses, Mom added as if I were performing charity work. I'd heard variations of this conversation at every family gathering since. I'd left my corporate accounting job 8 years ago. They'd been horrified when I'd quit a stable position at a mid-sized firm to work from home doing bookkeeping. They'd warned me about financial instability, lack of career growth, the dangers of self-employment. What they didn't know was that bookkeeping for small businesses was only about 20% of what I actually did. What they didn't know was that I'd spent the past 8 years building multiple passive income streams. What they didn't know was a lot of things. That's when Uncle Mike walked in from the kitchen. Uncle Mike was Dad's younger brother, a semi-retired investment banker who split his time between Boston and Florida. He'd always been the family's financial maverick, retiring at 55 after making smart investments. We'd gotten closer over the past few years after I'd asked him for advice about municipal bonds. Sorry I'm late, he said, setting down a bottle of wine. Traffic from the airport was brutal. He scanned the room and his eyes landed on me. Lauren, good to see you. I stood to hug him. Good to see you too, Uncle Mike. He stepped back, still smiling. How's that $156,000 yearly passive income treating you? Are you still reinvesting most of it, or have you started taking distributions? The room fell silent. Derek's bourbon glass stopped halfway to his mouth. My parents' heads swiveled toward me in perfect synchronization. Aunt Carol's eyes widened. What income? Dad whispered. I set down my glass of wine carefully on the coffee table. It's treating me well, Uncle Mike. I'm still reinvesting about 60% and living off the rest. Uncle Mike nodded approvingly. Smart. The compound growth at your age is going to be substantial. Are you still focused on dividend aristocrats, or have you diversified into REITs like we discussed? I've diversified, I said calmly. About 40% dividend stocks, 30% REIT distributions, 20% municipal bonds, and 10% in a private lending platform. Mom's hand was pressed against her chest. Lauren, what is he talking about? Uncle Mike looked around the room, his smile fading as he registered everyone's shocked faces. Oh, they don't know. We haven't really discussed it, I said evenly. Derek had found his voice. You're telling me you make $156,000 a year in passive income? On average, yes. Last year was $162,000. The year before was $149,000. It fluctuates based on market conditions and dividend payments. Dad sat down heavily in his armchair. That's impossible. You do bookkeeping for small businesses. I do bookkeeping for 15 small business clients, I clarified. That generates about $48,000 annually and takes me roughly 15 hours a week. The rest of my time I spend managing my investment portfolio. Uncle Mike was looking uncomfortable now. I'm sorry, Lauren. I assumed they knew. You've been building this for 7 years now? 8, I corrected. Since I left Patterson and Associates, Mom's face had gone pale. You told us you quit because you wanted a better work-life balance. That was true, I said. I wanted time to focus on building passive income streams instead of trading hours for dollars. Corporate accounting paid well, but it was capped. There are only so many hours you can bill. Derek was doing math in his head. I could see it. Even with your promotion, your salary is what, $110,000 after the increase. And you're saying you make $156,000 without working? I work, I said. Just not the way you define work. I spend about 10 hours a week researching investments, rebalancing portfolios, analyzing dividend sustainability, reading annual reports, plus the 15 hours on bookkeeping. It's a 25-hour work week, but it's very focused work. But where did you get the capital to invest? Dad demanded. He was an engineer, logical and methodical. You can't generate that level of passive income without significant principal, Uncle Mike answered for me. She started with about $85,000 when she left her corporate job. Savings plus a small inheritance from her grandmother. I helped her structure the initial portfolio. Grandma Helen's inheritance, Mom said faintly. You told us you put that in savings. I put it in investments, I corrected. Which is a form of savings, just one that generates income. I could see the calculations happening behind Dad's eyes. $85,000 8 years ago? Even with aggressive growth. The numbers don't work. They do if you reinvest all dividends and add fresh capital regularly. Uncle Mike explained. Lauren was adding $2,000 to $3,000 monthly from her bookkeeping income in the early years. The compound growth over 8 years is significant. My current portfolio value is approximately $2.1 million, I said quietly, generating an average yield of 7.4% annually. Derek's bourbon glass slipped in his hand, amber liquid sloshing. You have $2.1 million invested? In various instruments, yes. About $840,000 in dividend-paying stocks, $630,000 in REITs, $420,000 in municipal bonds, and $210,000 in a private lending platform. The silence was broken only by the timer going off in the kitchen. Mom didn't move to check on the turkey. Aunt Carol spoke up, her voice tentative. So when you said you couldn't afford to join us on that cruise to Alaska 2 years ago, I could afford it. I said, I chose not to spend $4,000 on a vacation when that money could be invested to generate $300 annually in perpetuity. It was a priority decision, not a financial constraint. But you drive a 10-year-old Honda, Mom protested, as if this proved something. Because it's paid off, reliable, and meets my transportation needs. A new car would be a depreciating asset that would cost $600 to $800 monthly between payments, insurance, and higher maintenance. I prefer to invest that money. Derek was shaking his head. This doesn't make sense. You live in a small apartment, you don't take expensive vacations, you wear normal clothes. You don't live like someone with $2 million. Exactly, I said. That's how I got to $2 million. Living below my means, investing the difference, letting compound growth work over time. Dad was staring at me like I was a stranger. Why didn't you tell us? I met his eyes steadily. I tried to, early on. When I first quit my corporate job, I explained that I wanted to focus on building passive income. You told me I was making a mistake. Mom cried because she thought I was throwing away my career. Derek said I was being irresponsible. That's because we thought you were just doing bookkeeping from home, Mom said weakly. I told you I was building an investment portfolio. You heard playing with stocks and dismissed it. The memory was clear in my mind. I'd come to Thanksgiving dinner in my second year of self-employment, excited to share that my passive income had reached $28,000 annually. Dad had said, "That's nice, honey, but you need stable employment." Derek had laughed and said, "Let me know when your hobby income matches a real salary." So I'd stopped sharing. I'd let them believe what they wanted to believe while I quietly built something they couldn't see because they weren't looking. Uncle Mike cleared his throat. For what it's worth, I think Lauren's approach has been brilliant. She identified early that time is more valuable than money and structured her life accordingly. But $156,000 a year. Derek's voice had an edge to it. I worked my ass off for 15 years to make $140,000 in salary. And you're telling me you make more than that without even having a real job? I have a real job, I said calmly. It just doesn't look like yours. The engineer and Dad couldn't help but calculate. $156,000 divided by 1,200 hours. $130 per hour. Plus my portfolio appreciation, I added, which last year was an additional $187,000 in unrealized gains. Though I don't count that as income since I don't plan to sell. Mom's hand was trembling as she reached for her wine. I don't understand how we didn't know this. You never asked the right questions, Uncle Mike said gently. You asked what Lauren did for work, she said bookkeeping. You asked how she was doing financially, she said fine. You assumed fine meant struggling or getting by. You never asked about her investment strategy or portfolio performance. Derek was still processing, his face cycling through emotions. So when you said you couldn't lend me $15,000 for my kitchen renovation 3 years ago, I said I preferred not to mix family and money, I corrected. I didn't say I couldn't afford it. I had $15,000 in my emergency fund alone. I just knew that lending money to family rarely ends well. But you let us think you were barely making ends meet. No, I said firmly. You assumed I was barely making ends meet because I live modestly. I never claimed to be struggling. Aunt Carol was looking at me with new eyes. The conference in San Diego you attended last spring. That was an investment conference, wasn't it? Not a bookkeeping seminar. Yes, I go to 2 or 3 per year. They're valuable for networking with other dividend investors and learning about emerging opportunities. Dad was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. Then he asked, "What's your 5-year plan, Lauren?" It was the first real question he'd asked about my financial life in 8 years. Continue building the portfolio to $3.5 million by age 42. At that point, passive income should be approximately $260,000 annually. I'll reduce bookkeeping to maybe 5 hours a week, just enough to maintain client relationships and stay sharp. Spend the rest of my time traveling, volunteering, maybe writing a book about financial independence. You'd have more passive income than I'll make at the peak of my career, Derek said flatly. Different paths, I said. You chose status and corporate advancement. I chose time freedom and financial independence. Neither is wrong. Mom's eyes were filled with tears. I feel like I don't know you. You know me, I said gently. I'm the same person I was an hour ago. You just know more about my financial situation now. Uncle Mike stood up. I think I smell something burning in the kitchen. Mom jumped up, suddenly remembering the turkey. She hurried toward the kitchen, Aunt Carol following to help. Dad remained in his chair, looking stunned. Derek stared into his bourbon like it held answers. I stayed on the couch, feeling oddly calm. This revelation had been inevitable eventually. Uncle Mike's casual question had simply accelerated the timeline. After a few minutes, Derek spoke. Can you teach me? About dividend investing, building passive income? I studied my brother carefully. Are you serious, or are you asking because you're embarrassed? He flinched but held my gaze. Both, but mostly serious. I make good money, but I spend almost all of it. I have maybe $40,000 in my 401k and $8,000 in savings. At 38, that's pathetic. It's not pathetic, it's just a different set of priorities. But changing those priorities requires real commitment. It means saying no to things your peers say yes to. It means living below your means, sometimes significantly below. Like driving a 10-year-old Honda instead of leasing a BMW. Exactly like that. He was quiet for a moment. I spent $90,000 on my kitchen renovation. You could have invested that and generated $6,000 a year forever. $6,700 at a 7.4% yield, yes. Jesus, he muttered. Dad finally spoke. I'm sorry, Lauren. I looked at him, waiting. I'm sorry we didn't take you seriously. I'm sorry we dismissed your choices. And I'm sorry we made you feel like you couldn't share this with us. I could have shared it, I said honestly. I chose not to because it was easier than constantly defending my decisions. You'd made up your minds about who I was and what my life looked like. I let you believe that while I built something different. Mom returned from the kitchen, her face blotchy from crying. Dinner's ready, she said quietly. Lauren, can we talk after we eat? Of course! We moved to the dining room, taking our usual seats around the table. The turkey sat in the center, perfectly browned. All the traditional dishes were laid out, stuffing, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes. But the usual dinner conversation was gone. Derek wasn't bragging about his promotion anymore. Mom wasn't beaming with pride at his accomplishments. Dad wasn't making jokes about my little bookkeeping business. Instead, we ate in relative silence, the weight of revelation hanging over the table. Finally, Aunt Carol spoke up. Lauren, I have a question. If you're making $156,000 in passive income, why do you still do bookkeeping at all? Because I enjoy it, I said simply. I like helping small business owners understand their finances. I like the puzzle of optimizing their accounting systems. And it keeps me sharp for managing my own investments. Plus, the $48,000 I make from it goes straight into new investments, accelerating the portfolio growth. But you could just not work at all. I could, I agreed. But then what would I do with my time? I work 25 hours a week doing things I find interesting and valuable. That leaves me with 43 hours of true free time weekly, not counting sleep. I read, I exercise, I volunteer at the Financial Literacy Center. I take classes. I have a life, just a different one than you might expect. Derek asked, do you ever feel like you're missing out? Like you sacrificed your 30s to build this portfolio? I considered the question carefully. No, I feel like I invested my 30s in buying my future freedom. You spent the last 15 years climbing a corporate ladder. I spent the last 8 years building a different kind of ladder, one made of dividend-paying stocks and compound interest. You're betting that your corporate success will eventually give you freedom. I've already achieved mine, but you don't live like you're free, Mom protested. You live so modestly. Modest by your standards, I corrected. But I have everything I need and most of what I want. I have a comfortable apartment in a neighborhood I love. I have a reliable car. I eat well. I have good health insurance through the Ake marketplace. I travel when I want to, just not lavishly. I'm not depriving myself. I'm just selective about what I spend on, Uncle Mike nodded. It's the difference between looking rich and being rich. Lauren chose being rich. Dad was quiet through most of dinner, but as we cleared the plates for dessert, he pulled me aside. Can I see your portfolio? The actual numbers, the allocation, the performance? Why? I asked, because I want to understand. And because maybe I've been wrong about a lot of things. I pulled out my phone and opened my portfolio tracking app. I showed him the dashboard, total value, asset allocation, dividend yield, year-to-date performance, projected annual income. He studied it for several minutes, his engineer's mind processing the data. Your bond allocation seems low for someone focused on income. Bonds yield 3 to 4% right now. Dividend aristocrats are yielding 2.5 to 3%, but with growth potential. REITs are at 4 to 6% with property appreciation. I'm optimizing for total return, not just current yield. And the private lending platform? Higher risk, higher reward. 9 to 11% returns, but with default risk. That's why it's only 10% of the portfolio. He handed back my phone. This is sophisticated. This isn't playing with stocks. No, I agreed. It's a carefully constructed income-generating machine. We returned to the dining room for pumpkin pie. The conversation slowly resumed, but it was different now. Derek asked questions about dividend sustainability. Mom wanted to know about the bookkeeping clients. Aunt Carol was curious about the Financial Literacy Center where I volunteered. For the first time in years, they were asking about my actual life instead of the life they'd imagined for me. As the evening wound down and people started gathering their coats, Mom pulled me into the kitchen. I'm sorry, she said, her eyes red. I'm sorry we didn't see you. I'm sorry we made assumptions. I'm sorry we made you feel like you couldn't share this with us. I forgive you, I said simply. Can we start over? Can you tell me about your life? Your real life, not the version we invented? I'd like that. She hugged me tightly. I'm so proud of you. I should have said that years ago. Driving home that night, I felt a strange sense of peace. The secret was out. My family finally knew who I actually was, what I'd actually built. But here's what I realized. Their knowing changed nothing about my success. The dividend checks would still arrive quarterly. The portfolio would still grow. The passive income would still flow. My freedom was still intact. Their recognition was validating, yes. But I'd already validated myself every quarter for the past 8 years, every time I reviewed my statements and saw the progress.
I had already won.
I'd won the first time my passive income exceeded my living expenses. I won the first time I turned down a corporate job offer because I didn't need it. I won the first time I calculated my net worth and realized I was actually wealthy by any reasonable standard. Their recognition was just the epilogue to a story I'd already written. I pulled into my apartment complex, parking my 10-year-old Honda in its usual spot. Tomorrow I'd review some quarterly reports for my dividend stocks. Next week I'd meet with 3 bookkeeping clients. Next month I'd attend an investment conference in Phoenix. My life would continue exactly as it had been, focused, intentional, and built on my own terms. The only difference was that now my family finally understood what I'd known for years. I was already free. And I'd been free for a long time.